In a remote valley between mountains, there was a small temple made of dark wood, protected by trees and the constant song of the wind. There lived the elderly Master Ryashin, a monk with a serene gaze and a silver beard, whose presence was like that of an ancient tree, firm, silent, and deeply rooted in the present. One day, a young man named Daiki arrived at the temple, his eyes burning with rage and his soul consumed by resentment. He had lost his family in a fire, and since then, the fire had inhabited him from within. His heart ignited with fury at injustice, and his steps were heavy like burning coals. "Master," said Daiki, bowing, "I have come seeking peace, but inside me, there are only ashes." Ryashin looked at him for a long time, and instead of answering, he silently led him to the mountainside, where a solitary fire was burning. The master sat in front of the flames and invited Daiki to do the same. "Observe it," he said calmly. "See how the fire transforms everything it touches." Daiki looked without understanding. The branches crackled, the embers glowed, and the smoke danced toward the sky. "The fire destroyed everything I loved," whispered the young man. "What wisdom is there in something so cruel?" The master took a burning branch and held it carefully, as if it were a torch. "With this flame too," he said softly, "I can show you the way in the darkness." And then, in the midst of silence, Daiki felt for the first time that his pain could mean something more than ruin. That night, Daiki did not sleep. He remained seated by the fire until the embers became a soft red whisper in the dark. The master's words echoed in his mind like a gentle echo. "With this flame too, I can show you the way." The next morning, Ryashin led him to the forest. They walked in silence, the master's steps so light that they barely left a trace. Suddenly, he stopped in front of a fallen tree, blackened by the lightning of an old storm. Its charred and twisted branches seemed like the perfect image of suffering. "This tree died by fire," said Ryashin, "but look around it." Among the scorched roots, small green shoots were sprouting. Ferns, moss, and new life began to emerge. The fire ravaged, yes, but it also made space for the new. When everything burns, everything can begin anew. Daiki looked at him, frowning. "Should I be grateful for the loss?" "No. Just let the fire do its work," answered the master. "Let it burn what must leave. Let it illuminate what must be born." The young man lowered his gaze, as if his own thoughts were burning. The resentment was still there, but something had changed. It was no longer a flame consuming him, but one that began to reveal shapes he could not see before. Days passed, and young Daiki began to participate in the tasks of the temple. He swept the floors covered with leaves, gathered water from the stream, and meditated at dawn alongside Ryashin. But still, deep inside, there remained that uncontrollable spark that flared every time the memory of the past returned. One afternoon, while chopping wood near the river, his thoughts became a storm. "Why my family?" he murmured, striking the log with force. "Why did the fire take their lives and not mine?" The axe fell with fury, splitting the wood in two. Rage took over his hands, his eyes, his breath. That night, Ryashin found him alone by the same fire where they had spoken for the first time. The fire danced, reflecting in the young man's face an inner struggle that had yet to find peace. "Do not fight against the fire," said the master in a soft voice. "If you fight it, it will consume you. If you listen to it, it will transform you. How can you listen to something that only screams destruction?" Ryashin took a small dry leaf and tossed it into the flames. It disappeared in an instant. The fire doesn't scream. It only transforms. You are the one who screams from pain. Learn to listen beyond the noise. For the first time, Daiki did not respond. He stayed watching as the wood burned slowly, and understood that there is a difference between burning and being consumed. Over time, Daiki began to understand the silent rhythm of the temple, where everything had a purpose and each action, no matter how small, carried a lesson. Sometimes, while cooking rice or gathering stones from the path, he was surprised to find himself remembering without anger. The inner fire, once violent, now burned with a different kind of heat, one that illuminated rather than scorched. One morning, while the sun barely touched the treetops, Ryashin handed the young man a paper lantern. "Today you will go alone," he said with a faint smile. "You will climb the mountain and spend the night in the clearing. No fire, no company, only the lantern and you." Daiki nodded in silence. In the past, he would have felt fear or anger at the idea. But now, a new stillness resided within him. During the ascent, he remembered many things. The warmth of the home he lost, his sister's laughter, the crackling of the flames consuming everything, and also the first time he felt that the fire could be more than loss. When he reached the clearing, he placed the lantern on the ground and sat down to watch it. The wind shook it, but it did not extinguish. And in that soft light, he understood something profound. The flame that burns within us can destroy what we were, but it can also illuminate what we are destined to become. Night slowly descended over the mountain, wrapping everything in a mantle of silence and shadows. The paper lantern cast a trembling circle of light around Daiki, who sat cross-legged, breathing in sync with the breeze. In the deepest stillness, thoughts emerged that he had never allowed himself to feel before. Silent tears rolled down his cheeks, not from anger, but from a grief that finally found space to exist without guilt. He realized that he had never truly mourned the loss of his family. He had only burned with fury against the world, like a wildfire without direction. The wind rose strongly during the early hours of the morning. The flame of the lantern flickered and eventually went out. The darkness was complete, and yet Daiki did not feel fear. He remained still, surrounded by shadows, eyes closed, and discovered that the true light did not depend on the lantern, but on what had begun to burn calmly inside his chest. At dawn, he descended the mountain without haste. The fire was still with him, but it was different. It was no longer fury, it was guidance. It no longer pushed him, it illuminated him. Ryashin was waiting for him by the stone bridge that crossed the stream. "Well?" asked the master. Daiki smiled, his eyes still moist. "The fire went out, but the night did not swallow me." Ryashin nodded gently, as one would watch a flower bloom after a long drought. From that day on, Daiki began to teach the travelers who arrived at the temple seeking solace. He did not speak much, but when he did, his words were like embers. Few, warm, and capable of igniting something deep within those who listened. He did not tell his story in detail. He simply shared what he had learned before the flames. That pain does not disappear, but it can transform. That rage can be a flame that devours or a light that guides. And that suffering, when observed with attention, has something to teach us. One afternoon, a child arrived at the temple. He had lost his mother in an accident, and his eyes were the same as Daiki had seen in his own face years ago, filled with uncontrollable fire. The young man led him to walk in the forest, without saying a word. They gathered dry branches, lit a fire, and sat before it, just as he had done with Ryashin. "Why does it burn so much inside?" the child asked. Daiki placed a hand on his shoulder and, after a few seconds of silence, replied, "Because something within you wants to be transformed." The child looked at him, confused, but he stayed watching the flames attentively. The silence enveloped him, as it had Daiki long ago, and within it, a seed of understanding was born. Thus, the fire continued to fulfill its purpose. Years passed, and Daiki became a silent guide to many. He was no longer the young man consumed by fury, but a man whose presence brought calm, like an ember that warms without burning. Ryashin, now very old, watched him with serene pride. One afternoon, while they walked slowly along the temple path, the master stopped under a flowering cherry tree. "Do you remember the day you arrived?" asked Ryashin, watching the flowers dance in the wind. "I remember it well. I was made of ashes," Daiki replied. The master smiled and pointed to the cherry tree. "After every fire in the forest, the ground seems dead. But beneath the ash, the seed is already waking." Daiki closed his eyes. He now understood that he had not been saved from the fire, he had been shaped by it. That the fire that had destroyed his past had also given him the strength to build his future. And not only that, it had ignited in him the ability to illuminate the path for others. That night, as he lit the paper lantern before the altar, he understood that every light in the temple, every soft and trembling flame, was the result of a fire that, at some point, had also consumed. And yet, there they were, lighting the path. One spring morning, Ryashin departed in silence, like a flame that extinguishes when it is no longer needed. His body was wrapped in white cloth, and his spirit, like smoke, rose without sorrow. Daiki remained for a long time in front of the altar, in the same spot where his master used to meditate. He did not cry. There was no lament, only gratitude. That night, he lit a single fire at the center of the temple. The monks and visitors gathered around it in silence, as the flames danced softly. Daiki stood up and spoke for the first time before everyone. "The fire that burns also transforms. The fire that devastates also reveals. And when we allow it to burn with awareness, it becomes light." No one applauded. No one interrupted him. Only the crackling of the wood filled the air. One by one, those present took a small candle and lit it from the same flame. Not to carry fire to others, but to carry light. And so, deep in the mountains, under the starry sky, the truth Ryashin once showed the young man with a soul of ashes was fulfilled. The fire that consumes also illuminates the path.